It's been a little bit of a while and I've missed you, but we're back. And today's film is Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by the legendary Martin Scorsese. And joining me on the Sun Armchairs is entertainment correspondent Rebecca Twomey. I'm Josh Rom, and this is Film Watch.
Whose land is this? My land.
Well, 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 our war hero has arrived. You made a good choice coming back here. Osage are the finest, wealthiest, and most beautiful people on God's earth. They outsmarted everybody.
They have the say. Who gets the oil?
Son, I got a question. You like women?
That's my weakness.
Well, we mix these families together, and that estate money flows the right direction. It'll come to us.
Shomikasi. That's how you are.
I don't know what you said, but it must have been Indian for handsome devil.
Rebecca, welcome to Film Watch.
Well, thank you for having me.
Killers of a Flower Moon, we'll dive straight in. First thoughts, quick, go.
Far too long. I fell asleep for about 10 minutes. I only woke up when my popcorn had tipped over on me. Sorry, Scorsese. It was just a very, very long time. I think it could have done with being a 6-part episode on Netflix or something, not a cinema
streamer
film.
service.
Or maybe have a break or an interval for someone like me who needs...
What, like kind of Gone with the Wind style into... I mean, listen, when you have a big, long, epic film like this, like, and we're seeing this quite a bit, you know, even Scorsese's last film, The Irishman, over 3-hour running time, Avengers Endgame, over 3 hours of running time. Do you think we actually, the kind of old age tradition of bringing intervals back, do you think that's kind of needed in cinema now?
Yeah, because they do it in parts of Europe. I went to one of the Star Wars films in Belgium, and they had an interval, and it meant I could go and get some wine halfway through, which I do like to have in cinema. And yeah, I just think also when you've got a complex story, like joking aside, when you've got something like Oppenheimer, very heavy topic area, or like this one, you need a bit of time, I think, just to reset, because there's a lot of themes going on. And I also like to discuss halfway through with someone, like in the theatre. Or what do you think? What do you think of this? And maybe think of some other things I hadn't necessarily thought of. More conscious viewing, I guess, in the cinema.
No, I get that. And the thing is, we see these kind of big budget blockbusters as well. We see these two-parters. We saw it with, for example, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows 1 and 2, Hunger Games Mockingjay 1 and 2. You know, it's a... Avengers, even though Endgame was so long, you know, it was very much made clear to the audience that this is a 2-part kind of ending, so to speak. You know, but if we're going to look into this film in particular, especially when it comes to Scorsese's back catalogue, how do you think this fares?
I know a lot of the film critics are very, very complimentary about it, but I think they're die-hard, respectful Scorsese fans. But when you look at things like Casino, which is like a true kind of like gritty crime situation in some ways, with really strong characters, the pace of that feels very normal, whereas this film, it just feels that the pace was ever so slow, drawn out, dare I say it, a bit indulgent.
I would absolutely agree with that, and I think we're used to seeing these real kind of pacey, really fast tempo action. I'm not going to say action-packed because, listen, this isn't, you know, Hunger Games, this isn't Harry Potter, but, you know, we are used to seeing the kind of rumble and tumble sort of scenes, especially when it comes to Goodfellas, especially, you know, The Wolf of Wall Street. That was very fast-paced, fast-moving, whereas this felt very long, it felt very drawn out. There was, I think it was more meticulous in terms of its storytelling. It didn't get to the point quick enough. Is that something that you felt?
Yeah, because it's based on a book, and I think it was like trying to honour the book and also be very respectful of the Native American community and make sure that they're sort of doing it in a respectful way. And I think that's where it sort of started to come a bit sort of not quite as exciting as you wanted it to be, or maybe we've just got very short attention spans, and we watched Squid Games in lockdown and needed that like hard impact, hard drama, and maybe this is a good exercise for even me going to cinema to have something slower. But it just felt like, is it a love story? Is it a crime story?
It's one of those where it almost felt like it was so many genres mixed in. Like, for example, Goodfellas, we know it's a gangster thriller type thing. We know the genre there. The Irishman was very much seen as a kind of a continuation of that genre. This had love elements, it had political elements, it had murder and crime elements. It almost, I think because it was so long, as you said, there is that element of it doesn't quite know what it is.
Just get on with it. I was halfway through thinking, when is the action, the excitement going to happen? It just felt like it could have been told so many different ways as well, which I thought was interesting. Because obviously Scorsese's loyal to Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, and they were brilliant characters and really brought life to it, but it felt like it could have been told from so many different perspectives. Instead, it's sort of the white men were very much at the centre of it.
Yes, but I think the thing is, if
that's
we're
not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. I think the character of Molly, played by Lily Gladstone in particular, first and foremost, if she's not nominated for Best Supporting Actress in this year's Oscars, I think there is something wrong with the world. But if we look at her character in particular, I don't think the story necessarily needed to be told from her point of view, because the character's point of view was, I think, made very clear, and especially those sickness scenes were absolutely incredible. But where I would agree with was, I don't think it was told from the right point of view. I actually think it would have been better being told from Robert De Niro's character, William Hale's point of view, and I think that kind of, I think the kind of corrupt politician is actually a theme that is really quite contemporary at the moment, really quite topical at the moment. So I actually think if they told it from that point of view, the corrupt politician with all different motives, playing all of these different characters, rather than Leonardo DiCaprio's character's point of view, rather than Ernest's point of view, I think that would have completely transformed the movie. What do you think?
But I think the betrayal element is actually, like you just mentioned, a really strong part of the story. And De Niro's character, didn't really look at much of how he gained the trust of this community and how he was so trusted that he was sort of enabled to get away with some of these things and manipulate. Obviously, he was a powerful character in that town, but I think the betrayal element could have been done a lot stronger, and that's why I think as well with the character of Molly that her husband betrayed her, and there wasn't really any sort of look at this. I think they're being very careful not to do the typical cowboys and Indians, where the Indians are doing inverted commas because that can be offensive.
And also, it's one of those things where it wasn't a kind of oppression versus oppressor point of view, because at the beginning of the film especially, you know, the Osage, the Indian characters, they were very much on top at the beginning of the film. They were very much kind of not in control, but you know, they had high social, they had the money, they had the land, they had the high social standing, and there were kind of all of these different themes going on there, and that's what I think made it very interesting, and why I think it should have been told from Robert De Niro's character's point of view, because it was the way that he was using that community to his own advantage. And I also think, Molly's story in particular, you know, especially when we look at Leonardo DiCaprio, his character is clearly in love with her, but yet is trying to murder her at the same time to please Robert De Niro's character, William Hale. So, you know, the story itself, I think, was so interesting and actually could have been an incredible crime thriller. And actually, if they stuck to the kind of fast-paced montage kind of elements with Robert De Niro's character in particular, I think that could have really served it well.
I think though with Leo is that what's really good is that he's played against type in this film, and that's where you really see what an incredible actor he is. I always love the bit where he was being, I was going to say spanked, where he was being punished.
I was going to say, that is almost a conversation in itself. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio having more padding than a drag queen. That was a moment. Being spanked by Robert De Niro, no spoilers. Yeah, what a
That would have been a very different film.
I mean, what a moment that was, wasn't it?
It really was, but I just have so much respect for Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor. I think he's incredible to bring this...
Because, okay,
no,
he's got padding and getting spanked, okay, yeah, brilliant. And getting paid shed loads to do so, yeah, top respect there.
But what I think is that he played this sort of bit of a dumb, hapless idiot ever so well, and that's not something we usually see him do. And I think the way he was manipulated by his uncle was very clever, and the way he was in love with someone, but he was still doing this terrible thing to them, that sort of abuse situation. There's so many themes, and perhaps there's almost too many themes in this film.
It felt a bit convoluted in
for it to be enjoyable, because you are, I think, for the first 2 hours, because it's 3.5 hours, for the first 2 hours, you're
very
kind of
slow.
working out what's going on. And then the ending seemed a little bit like when they were doing the radio recording, I couldn't quite work out what that was doing there.
It was kind of, I think, almost like, I thought back when I was watching that, almost to La La Land epilogue type filmmaking, kind of brought back. And I think it was a way, that was a way for them to wrap up the story in a clear and concise way, because if they told that as if it was like proper live action, that would have been an extra hour added onto the film. Honestly, and honestly, a 4.5 hour film, yeah, okay, like we're really edging on into something else there.
I think it's sometimes just get. I'm being hypercritical. It is a good film, I enjoyed it, but I think sometimes it can just get a little bit indulgent when you've got a director of this calibre with that sort of money that people trust, that people are going to go and see a Scorsese, can't even say it. Like,
well, I was gonna ask, do you think, because Scorsese has such a stellar reputation, do you think people automatically go in there with too high of expectations that no matter what he does now, because he has that reputation, because he's built up these genres by himself single-handedly over time, do you think the expectations are almost too high now for him to live up to in his career?
Well, there has been a lot of conversation, hasn't there, around whether he's at the sort of tail end of his career and it's not. I mean, how do you replicate that success? I'm not saying he's not a phenomenal filmmaker, because he is. I think just sometimes when you know you're going to have a success, it's probably harder than when you've got to prove something. I don't think there's anything left to prove. So this film, people will go and see because his name's attached to it, because he has those actors in the film. Yeah. I think that's where really everyone's going to see it. But it's things like the Barbie movie, you know.
We're not talking about that.
But what I'm saying is people are going to that. People will go to the second one, or like Glass Onion.
Yeah.
They'll go to the second one because the first one was so successful, but doesn't necessarily, the box office success does not really, when you're talking about the quality of the film, the two don't correlate.
Well, this is the thing, and this is why we do this show, because this show is not telling people what to think like usual critics. I know a lot of critics out there think that their voice is the only voice that matters, and the critics' consensus is the only point that matters, and that's exactly why we do the show. We don't tell you what to think, we just tell you simply what's on, and no matter what we think, we still encourage you guys to go to the cinema and to, you know, make up your minds. We want to hear your point of view. Finally, I would say, out of 5 stars, Killers of a Flower Moon, how'd you rate it?
3.5.
I'm going to go the same, 3.5 stars as well. I think it definitely had elements that could have made it a proper success. I definitely think this is going to be the sort of film that will get quite a few nominations, I think, at the Academy Awards. I think this is a solid Best Picture nominee, and it's a very solid Best Picture nominee type of film, and I think Apple TV Plus, they're probably thinking this is probably going to be, Apple Studios, this is probably going to be their contender this year. But I think running time, too long, convoluted themes, stellar performances though.
Incredible performances. But what else do you expect with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro in that? It would just be nice to see a few other films get nominated as well. It's almost a bit too obvious that this would be
I think it's still relatively early on in the season. We've got, you know, One Life to go, you know, Poor Things with Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, Yorgos Lanthimos' latest outing, so to speak. So, you know, I still think it's a little bit too early to kind of say exactly what's going to be nominated, but I do think this is a strong Oscar contender, even though we're both giving it a score of 3.5. But also, is this a kind of sign of critics' consensus in our own way?
3.5, go and see it, but maybe have a nap before you go, not during it.
Brilliant. Rebecca, thanks so much.
Thank you.
A bit of a mixed bag when it came to what we thought of the film, but this is just our opinion, and this is the show that doesn't tell you what to think, but simply says what's on. For more, of course, keep up to date with The Sun Showbiz for all the latest news, trailers, analysis, you name it, we have it. And if you like what you see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.